What's up, guys? Today we have the 2018 iPad Pro, and then we have the 10.5-inch iPad Pro, the previous generation model. And this model does have the similar specs to the 12.9-inch model that it was paired with, but we do not have the 12-inch model for reference. So we're going to have to go with the 10.5-inch on this one. But for this one, we have the 12.9-inch model, and we don't have a 1 terabyte storage drive, so we do still have 4 gigabytes of RAM. Just in case you didn't know, there is 6 gigabytes of RAM that comes with the 1 terabyte model. So yeah, let's go and check out the settings, and let's check out basically the about screen, and we'll show you a little bit about what we are running. So iOS 12.1.1, we are on beta 2 on both models. So that is basically the versions that we're running. Capacity 64 gigabyte version for the iPad Pro on the left, and then we have 256 on the right. So we are going to go ahead and delete the settings app from the app switcher here. We're going to totally clear the app switcher, and we are going to run some Geekbench tests to start out with. So let's go ahead and open up Geekbench on both devices, and then we'll go ahead and run that test. We are going to start out with the CPU test, but before we get into that, I'm just going to go over the processor that we have for the iPad Pro on the left here, the 10.5-inch model. We have the A10X Fusion chip, and then on the right, we have the A12X Bionic chip. So it doesn't show that here simply because they haven't updated software, but that is what is in this, this configuration of the iPad Pro. Both of them have the same amount of memory, so we are pretty even as far as memory and all that goes. So let's go ahead and run the CPU benchmark on both of these devices. Now, one thing to note, they will speed up, and basically I'll have this run through so that you don't have to wait for the entire process. But whatever iPad finishes first doesn't exactly mean that it's the fastest. So just keep that in mind. Now, there are a lot of expectations with the iPad 12.9-inch model simply because so far we've seen the 12.9-inch model in our initial benchmark reach scores that were really high, really high, and almost comparable to a 15-inch MacBook Pro Retina display, touch bar, the whole works, 2018 model. It was absolutely insane. But what we are looking at is basically iOS. We still have iOS on these devices here. So it doesn't really matter if it could reach the speeds of a MacBook Pro because that's running a completely different architecture in Mac OS. So we aren't able to run Final Cut Pro on the iPad Pro here. We are able to do so many things with the iPad Pro. So I feel like the processing speed is basically a little overkill for iOS, but maybe comparable to like a mid-range laptop within the Mac OS kind of family. So let's go ahead and see the results. We'll kind of speed everything up here, and let's get going with the results for the iPad Pro benchmarks. Wow, our scores are in, and for the single core on the iPad Pro 10.5-inch model from previous generation, we have a single core of 3948, so 3,948, and for the multi-core, 9,531. And if we shift over to the right, this is absolutely insane. We have a single core score of 4,973, and for the multi-core, 17,905, and that isn't even the fastest score that we've gotten on this iPad Pro. Now, keep in mind that the single core score doesn't really reflect, a lot of processes nowadays are multi-core, so just keep that in mind. You won't see much variation with single core speeds. This single core speed is actually almost right on top of the 2018 15-inch MacBook Pro. So single core really isn't the highlight of a CPU, it's really the multi-core score. So we did our calculations, and it looks like the 2018 iPad Pro 12.9-inch model is actually outperforming the previous generation iPad Pro by over 40%. It's actually at 41%, and Apple only quoted us 35% increase in speed. So I'm really impressed with these numbers. Let's go ahead and go over to the compute score and run the compute test. And with the 2018 iPad Pro, we have a 7-core GPU, which is absolutely insane. Apple did say that we are seeing like basically Xbox One S graphics performance with this new iPad. And honestly, I'm not too impressed with the graphics performance in game. I don't think that this thin of a tablet could run, games like an Xbox could, just because there's so much cooling power within an Xbox, and I feel like GPU performance would be just a little bit better. And also, it's on a completely different platform. I mean, this isn't apples to apples. We are comparing many different things here. But as these finish up, we'll go ahead and take a look at the scores. And for the 10.5-inch model, we have a 30,658 and a 40,271 for the new 2018 12.9-inch iPad Pro. So we just got done with our calculations between these two scores, and it looks like the iPad Pro, the 12.9-inch iPad Pro from this year, is outperforming the previous generation. It looks around 31%. So 31% here on the GPU and 41% on the CPU. So these are pretty significant tests. So the next test that we are going to run is Antutu, and we'll run it on both of our devices here. We'll just go ahead and start the testing right away. Not too much to talk about, but Antutu really does test quite a few things. So first the GPU, then memory, then CPU, and then UX. So this is pretty intensive on both of these devices. So let's just see what scores we get with these tests running on both the 12.9-inch iPad Pro from this year and the 10.5-inch iPad Pro from last year. And basically on the left, you can see that we do have a few stutters here and there, but on the 12.9-inch model, it just looks a little bit more smoother. So I'm really excited to see exactly how graphics performance pans out. Now, I will increase the speed on these just to get you through the test so you don't have to wait for the full thing, and then we'll look at the results in just a second. So it looks like the two tests are just finishing up here. The iPad Pro 10.5-inch is a little behind here, but let's go over these scores for the iPad Pro 12.9-inch from this year. We have a really high score of 443,136, and we'll just kind of divide these up. It kind of divides the scores up as to how high it scored on each of the tests. So we'll go ahead and kind of compare that over to the 10.5-inch model whenever it wants to finish. So wow, we are getting actually more than double the score with the new iPad Pro. So if we take a look at these scores here, we are seeing almost double the performance with the CPU. We are definitely seeing more than double the performance with the GPU. UX is not as big of a difference, but still pretty significant. And then memory looks like it's doing a lot better with this brand new iPad Pro. And let's just keep this in mind. The iPad Pro, if any devices here were not doing well, it would be the iPad Pro 10.5-inch, which would have the basically advantage because the app hasn't been updated yet to run the 12.9-inch properly. So this is a really high score. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this translates into a user experience, but let's talk about that for just 1 second. Now, a user experience. Going and swiping through the UI, looking at our control center, opening up apps like the App Store, that is going to be pretty seamless and pretty fast, especially running iOS. I have had no issues with opening, closing apps and everything like that on the 10.5-inch model. So I think kind of going throughout that opening and closing of apps would kind of be pointless because we already know that this is pretty comparable to the iPhone XS Max, and that doesn't have any issues whatsoever. So I think we are going to do a part 2 of this basically speed test because I want to see how fast render performance is on both of these devices, how fast the render performance is, and how fast the exporting performance is. We're going to get some pretty intensive tests for these iPad Pros, but you saw the initial benchmarks where we are 41% faster with the CPU versus the 10.5-inch model for the 12.9-inch model, and then for the GPU it looks like we're at 31%, so we do have quite a bit of performance increase between these two devices. Now I did want to do one more test, and basically that's a simple restart, and we are going to use the assistive touch feature just to make sure that we have a good and even restart. So we'll go ahead, go to control center here, device, more, and then we'll have our restart button there. We'll do the same on this one, device, more, and then we'll go ahead and do a restart. So tap restart, and then we'll restart both of our devices at the same time and see the restart time. Now, I did see a faster restart time with the iPad Pro 12.9-inch model. It was extremely fast. So let's go ahead and compare the two. Looks like the 10.5-inch model was slower to turn off, even though I pressed them at the exact same time. So let's just wait to see that Apple logo, and it looks like the 10.5-inch model is in the lead right now versus the 12.9-inch model, and we'll just see which one pops up faster. Now, we won't have to speed through this one because iPads really load up quite quickly now. I remember back in the day, they used to load up pretty slowly. Now, it looks like the 12.9-inch model was faster by just, I'd say, maybe a second at most. So that is quite interesting. Obviously, we're seeing a lot higher CPU performance, GPU performance, but still on a restart, you know, they're both the same. I'd expect nothing less from both of these devices. They're both really fast. The 10.5-inch model is honestly a device I would still use. I got the 12.9-inch model to check it out and see what's new. But honestly, the 10.5-inch model for me was not lagging. It was not slow. iOS 12 did not bog this down. So I'm really excited to see, what are we going to get with iOS 13 with these models. I know it's quite early to start talking about it, but we just have a few months ahead of us, and then we'll start seeing iOS 13 and what that brings to our iPads here. So stay tuned for part 2 of this speed test. We are going to basically render some files and see exactly how fast they are, and then also stay tuned for more coverage on using this with an external display. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching this video. Make sure to get subscribed to see more content on the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, and hopefully we'll be seeing you in some upcoming videos. Thank you again for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.